I'm a single mother of two and just currently went back to school to finish my bachelor's degree in nursing. This happened in New Jersey at the time. I originally started it a few years back, but due to my fiancée passing away, I had to stop everything and take care of my children. It was Christmas Eve of 2024, and I just finished wrapping the last of the presents under the tree. I lived with my mom at the time as I couldn't afford rent alone, and working a part-time job while in school was a mission. My kids were fast asleep at this point, so I wouldn't have to worry about them hearing me wrapping presents. My mom had helped me finish wrapping the last present before I told her that I was going to bed and to have a nice night. We gave each other a hug and kiss before going to sleep. I got into bed, super eager to finally get some shut-eye, and I did for a good few hours before I was awoke to faint noises. It was coming from my mother's room, and it was only then when I realized it had been one of my kids talking to my mom. I get up and walk over to see what it was he wanted when my mom spoke up and said, "He came into my room talking about how he heard something on the roof." My son, who was 5 at the time, went on to tell me that him and his brother awoke to noises on our roof and that Santa had come. However, my mother and I had no idea what he was talking about, but both of us saw it as an opportunity to enlighten the Christmas spirit and told him that he better get to bed before Santa caught him awake. My son bolted back towards his room and hopped into bed while I asked my mom what they heard on the roof. She told me that she didn't know, but that the kids described it as a knocking sort of sound to which they assumed were reindeer. My mom has a large tree that towers over her house, so it was possible that what they heard was snow hitting the roof falling from the tree. Out of curiosity, my mother had asked if I could go out and see what it was just to make sure it wasn't an animal or anything. I didn't feel like stepping out into the cold, but I obviously couldn't say no to my mom, and so I had to do it. I put on my boots and step out into the night, expecting to see a bunch of snow or an animal. At first, I couldn't see anything, but at an angle, I could make out the shape of a person crouched down on the roof. This person was wearing all black, so I didn't see his face. I put my hand over my mouth, trying not to scream my lungs out, and slowly went back inside. Once I was in, I ran upstairs to my mother's room, telling her to get my dad's rifle because there was someone on the roof. My mom went wide-eyed and went into the closet to pull out my dad's guns he kept. She gave me the larger one while she kept the handgun. We are a big gun family, so we own several firearms when needed. My mom and I both walk outside and see the person still up on our roof. I then yell at them to get down or that we would shoot them if they didn't listen. This person saw us with our firearms and bolted upright while jumping down from the roof and running into the woods nearby. My mother fired a couple rounds with none of them hitting the person. However, the sound of gunshots were loud enough to wake both my children and neighbors up, who then called the police. Unfortunately, the police couldn't really do anything since there wasn't any trace of this person we saw on the roof. They declared that whoever we saw was long gone by now and that we should lock all of our doors and windows. My mom and I did just that, with one of the officers agreeing to stay with us until we felt safe. Now let's fast forward till around 3 a.m. The cop watching over us leaves and I get ready to go back to sleep. I decided I'd go and check on my kids just to make sure everything was okay. The very second I step into their room, I saw both of them fast asleep, along with someone peeking in through their window. I yelled for my mom to get the gun as I see this person bolt out of there and back around the house. We ended up calling 911 again, and this time with them showing up with other units. The perpetrator didn't get very far though. Police had found him hiding behind our recycling bins out back, and upon getting a better look at him, he looked nothing what I would have imagined. Apparently, he's a violent schizophrenic and was only 27 years old who suffered from intense mental health. For context, he was off his medication for weeks and thought that all children in the neighborhood had formed a pact with the devil and thought they were demons. You bet your life I never wanted this man near my kids again, and he was arrested and sent off to some mental institution. Somehow my mom never heard of this guy, even though he had been arrested before for assault and battery on a woman. This all just happened last year, and now that the day is coming up again, it still won't leave me. I just hope he's getting the proper care he needs. This happened when I was a kid, maybe around 6 or 7. Don't even get me started with the 6-7 jokes. I lived with my dad in the Chicago area at the time, as I was growing up in a toxic household with a mentally ill mother. Long story short, she was mentally unstable and obviously couldn't provide for me, so to speak. My dad wasn't the best father in the world, but he was a whole lot better than my mother by a landslide. Yes, he could be an ass sometimes, but he was always there for me when I needed it. It was Christmas Eve in the mid-2000s, and I'd just gotten ready for bed, ready to open presents the next morning. I remember staying in bed, so eager for tomorrow that I honestly couldn't sleep. At one point, I took a look to my side and saw my alarm clock read 1:07, and at that point, I couldn't take it anymore. I got out of my bed and walked over to the Christmas tree and was surprised to see presents laid out under the tree. But what was this? Upon looking around the living room, I saw that the front door was left open. This was strange, as my dad is normally very strict about leaving doors open, so I was shocked that it was like that. My dad is really tight on saving electricity, so when someone would leave a door or a window open, he'd flip, especially during the summer. Without thinking much of it, I closed the door, and that's when I heard something coming from my dad's room. My 7-year-old self figured it must have been Santa. Ecstatic at this point, I run to my dad's room expecting to see Santa, but instead saw a man I had never seen before going through my dad's drawer. He spotted me instantly and put his finger to his lips, giving me a hushing sound. In that moment, I didn't know how to feel or how to react. To make matters worse, my dad was laying on the bed, seemingly motionless. I watch as this man takes a few of my dad's belongings and walks out the front door. At this point, I knew something was off, so I took the home phone and called 911 and tried my best to explain everything. As you'd expect, however, my explanation was anything but useful. The only thing that got the operator's attention was when I told them that I thought my dad was dead. They ended up tracing the call to my address, where they ended up finding my dad. Turns out, my dad thankfully wasn't dead, but was simply knocked out by an excessive amount of an unknown substance. It's unclear whether investigators had identified what it was, but needless to say, he did recover. The person I saw in my house was never found. I was very young, and this was the 2000s, so tracing a person down was harder than today. Also, because the intruder didn't necessarily harm anyone, there wasn't much police could do. It was bullshit, but in a way I understand. They have bigger fish to fry. I've since remembered that Christmas ever since, and it still gives me the chills. My name is Jordan, and this happened on Christmas morning of 2012. Seeing as this was about 12 years ago, I can't remember every detail, but I'll try my best to explain everything that happened. Ever since I was very young, I lived with my aunt and uncle throughout my childhood. Long story short, my mom was a major meth head, and my dad spent a long time in jail. Because of that, they were in no position to raise a kid, and that was why I went to live with my extended family. Ever since then, I felt happier around them, where they actually cared for me and my well-being. Anyway, it was Christmas morning, and me, being the excited 6-year-old I was, went out into the living room. Stocked under the tree were a bunch of presents and gifts. It was a child's dream come true. At that point in time, I ran to my aunt and uncle's room and waked them up to tell them that Santa had come. As tired as they were, they sucked it up and came out to watch me open my presents and just appreciating the Christmas spirit. I'd say it took us a full hour to open all of the presents before cleaning up all of the open wrapping paper and other trash. As I was holding the trash bag open, I thought I could see something from the corner of my eye by the stairs. That's when I look over and see 2 pairs of shoes walking upstairs. Being only 6, I could only assume it was Santa, and I had dropped my bag and ran towards the stairs. I remember just looking up at the top of the stairs when my aunt asks me what I was looking at. I just responded with Santa and pointed up the stairs. This made my aunt and uncle laugh it off as me being imaginative or trying to be funny in some way. My aunt comes over to me and grabs me by the hand and then looks up at the stairs when she saw it. At the top of the stairs in the guest bedroom was someone hiding behind the door. The room upstairs was dark, so she couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. My aunt screamed at the top of her lungs and told my uncle to call the police. This caused me to start crying as I didn't understand what was going on at the time. According to my aunt, whoever was up there didn't bother trying to run and just sort of stayed where they were hiding. Our neighborhood was located not too far from a police station, so they were able to get here pretty quickly. However, in similar situations like this, whoever we saw upstairs was gone. He got away with it scot-free. We always kept our doors locked at all times, so it would be extremely difficult for someone to just break in like that. Mind you, we had a dog too, so the fact that he didn't sense that someone else was in the house made the situation even more weird. This made my aunt and uncle believe that whoever was in our house was someone we knew. We almost never used the upstairs, as it was only for guests or for company staying over. My aunt had some valuable stuff in the closet of that room, nearly $5,000 worth of stuff, and most of it had been taken. Police had found no evidence as to who it might have been, and we aren't sure as to how they got away. My uncle believes it had to be through the upstairs window, but that hasn't been confirmed nor denied. 2 weeks later, my uncle had went upstairs to fix a pipe that had apparently been leaking when he found something disturbing. In one of the closets upstairs, he had found various kitchen knives stabbed into the wall, along with several food wrappers and a sleeping bag. The sleeping bag being my uncle's. Whoever it was had been living in our home for God knows how long and had since been eating our food. In fact, this explains why we were so suspicious about how our food had been disappearing so fast. While my aunt and uncle believe it could have been someone we knew, I believe it had possibly been a squatter seeking shelter. This would explain why they were eating our food and why they had stayed in the house. We haven't seen that person since, and I'll always remember what happened that one Christmas.